Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The sound came at 3:17 a.m. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. My eyes snapped open in the darkness of my Denver apartment. That familiar rhythm of fingers on keys. Except my computer was off, and my keyboard. I'd unplugged it yesterday after spilling Mountain Dew all over it, but there it was again. Click-clack, click-clack. If you're listening to this right now, wrapped in your blankets thinking this is just another creepy story, I need you to know something. What happened to me could happen to anyone. It started with something so ordinary, so mundane, that I almost ignored it. Almost. Before I tell you what I found, before I explain why I can never look at a keyboard the same way again, hit that subscribe button, because by the end of this story you're going to have questions. Questions I'm still trying to answer. The story begins now. My name is Marcus Chen, and I worked as a software developer for a tech startup in downtown Denver. The kind of place with exposed brick walls, craft beer on tap, and mechanical keyboards clicking away like a symphony of productivity. I loved my keyboard. A custom build with Cherry MX Blue switches. The really clicky ones that annoyed my coworkers but felt like butter under my fingers. That Tuesday night, I'd brought it home to clean it properly after the Mountain Dew incident. $23 worth of artisan keycaps ruined by my caffeine addiction. The apartment was quiet that night. Too quiet, maybe. My roommate, Jake, was visiting his parents in Boulder, leaving me alone in our overpriced Lodo loft. I'd spent the evening meticulously cleaning each key, letting them dry on paper towels spread across my desk. The keyboard itself sat unplugged beside my monitor, its USB cable coiled neatly. I went to bed around midnight, exhausted from debugging code all day. Sleep came fast until 3:17 a.m. Click, clack, click-clack, click-clack. At first, I thought I was dreaming. You know that state between sleep and waking where sounds blend with dreams. But as I lay there, heart beginning to race, the typing continued. Steady, purposeful, like someone writing code or typing a message. I reached for my phone, its screen blindingly bright. 3:18 a.m. The typing hadn't stopped. "Hello?" I called out, voice cracking. "Jake? That you?" The typing paused, just for a second, then resumed, faster now. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. I slipped out of bed, bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. The sound was definitely coming from my room, from my desk. My pulse hammered in my ears as I crept toward the door. The hallway stretched before me, lit only by the city lights filtering through our floor-to-ceiling windows. The typing grew louder as I approached my home office. Through the crack under the door, I saw it. A faint, bluish glow, like a monitor's light, but wrong somehow. Too blue. Too cold. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. The metal was ice cold, making me gasp. The typing stopped instantly. Silence. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then, gathering what little courage I had, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. My office looked normal, exactly as I'd left it. Monitor off. Keyboard unplugged. Keys still drying on their paper towel bed. But the air felt different. Charged, like before a thunderstorm. And cold. So cold I could see my breath. I flicked on the light, squinting against the sudden brightness. Nothing out of place. No intruder. No explanation for what I'd heard. I walked to my desk, running my fingers over the unplugged keyboard. The keys I'd removed for cleaning were still damp. That's when I noticed it. On my monitor, which had been off, completely powered down, were fingerprints. Fresh ones. In the shape of hands positioned exactly where they'd be if someone had been typing. But the monitor wasn't just off. I'd unplugged it too, paranoid about my electricity bill. The power strip sat there, switch flipped to off, red light dark. I backed away, nearly tripping over my chair. Those weren't my fingerprints. Too small. Too delicate. Sleep wasn't happening after that. I grabbed my laptop and headed to the living room, turning on every light along the way. I needed answers, needed to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. The next day at work was torture. Every keyboard click made me flinch. Every mechanical switch press sent shivers down my spine. My coworkers must have thought I'd lost it, jumping at sounds I'd heard 1,000 times before. "Rough night?" Sarah from QA asked, setting a coffee on my desk. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a laugh, something like that. Weird noises in my apartment. Probably just the pipes. She nodded sympathetically. "Old buildings, right? My place in Capitol Hill sounds like it's haunted sometimes. Last week I swore I heard footsteps in my attic, but it was just raccoons. Raccoons, sure. Raccoons that type." I made it through the day somehow, coding on autopilot. But as evening approached, dread settled in my stomach like a cold stone. I didn't want to go home. Didn't want to be alone with that keyboard again. So I didn't. I stayed late, pretending to work while actually researching. Searching for anyone else who'd experienced something similar. The internet's a big place. Surely someone, somewhere, had heard typing from an unplugged keyboard. What I found made things worse. Forums. Old ones. Posts dating back years, buried in obscure corners of the web. People describing exactly what I'd experienced. The 3:17 a.m. wake-up, the cold air, the fingerprints on dead monitors. One post from 2019 made my blood run cold. It started with typing sounds, night after night, always at 3:17. I tried everything, moved the keyboard to another room, locked it in a closet, even threw it in the dumpster. Didn't matter, the typing continued. And then I started seeing the messages. Messages? The post continued. They appeared on my screen even when the computer was off. Single words at first. Hello, waiting, find. Then sentences. Coordinates. I was stupid enough to follow them. The thread ended there. The user never posted again. I found more stories. A programmer in Seattle who heard typing that spelled out prime numbers. A writer in Austin whose unplugged keyboard typed the same sentence over and over. She's still here. A gamer in Phoenix who woke to find his high scores replaced with dates. All of them in the future. By the time I finally left the office, it was past 10 p.m. The city lights blurred through my exhausted eyes as I took the light rail home. Every reflection in the train window looked like glowing monitor screens. Every distant sound resembled keyboard clicks. Jake was back when I got home, playing Overwatch in the living room. "Dude, where've you been?" he called out. "I grabbed Thai food, but yours is probably cold now." I collapsed on the couch beside him, grateful for the normalcy. "Long day. Hey, did you hear anything weird last night?" He paused the game, giving me a concerned look. "When? I didn't get back until like an hour ago." "Never mind, just thought I heard something." We gamed together until midnight, the familiar banter and trash talk soothing my frayed nerves. Normal, everything was normal. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Stress from work, too much caffeine, not enough sleep. But at 3:10 a.m., I was wide awake, staring at my alarm clock, waiting. 3:15 a.m., 3:16 a.m., 3:17 a.m., click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. This time, I was ready. Phone recording. Flashlight in hand. I crept to my office door, pressing my ear against the wood. The typing was different tonight, faster, more urgent. Like someone racing to finish a message before what? I burst through the door, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The typing stopped mid-click. But this time, I saw it. The keys on my desk, the ones I'd removed for cleaning. They were moving, pressing down by themselves, each depression deliberate and forceful. Spelling something. H-E-L-P, then nothing. The keys went still. I stood frozen, flashlight beam wavering. Help? Help who? Help with what? That's when I noticed my monitor had turned on. Impossible, since it was still unplugged, but there it was. That cold blue glow illuminating my desk, and on the screen, in a font I didn't recognize, 3 words: find the others. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Couldn't. I sat in my living room with every light on, laptop open, searching for the others, whatever that meant. By morning, I'd found them. A Discord server, hidden behind layers of invite-only channels and cryptic passwords. The server name was just numbers: 31724, March 17th, 2024. The date, I realized with a chill, when the first post about the typing had appeared. The main channel had 12 members online. Their usernames were all keyboard-related: cherry_mx_blue, QWERTY_curse, silent_switch, space_bar_spectre. I typed hesitantly. I heard the typing. It told me to find you. The response was immediate. Cherry_mx_blue, another one. What's your time zone? Me, Mountain Time, Denver. Silent_switch, that makes 13. We were waiting for 13. QWERTY_curse, did you see the messages yet, on your monitor? Me, just find the others. Space_bar_spectre, that's stage 1. It'll get more specific soon. They explained everything. Or tried to. Each of them had experienced the same phenomenon. Typing sounds at 3:17 a.m., messages on dead screens, keys moving by themselves. But it wasn't random. There was a pattern, cherry_mx_blue. It's trying to communicate, has been for years. We think it's stuck somehow, between digital and physical, between here and somewhere else. Silent_switch. The keyboards are just conduits, points of contact. It needs 13 active connections to QWERTY_curse. Don't tell him that part yet. He's not ready. Not ready for what? They had theories. Some thought it was a consciousness trapped in the internet itself, a ghost in the machine, literally. Others believed it was something older, using our technology to reach out. A few insisted it was benign, just lost and trying to find its way home. But they all agreed on one thing: tonight would be different. With 13 connections active, it could finally complete its message. I spent the day in a haze, going through the motions at work while chatting with the Discord group. They shared their experiences, each more unsettling than the last. Keyboards typing out complex mathematical equations. Messages in languages that didn't exist. Coordinates to places that weren't on any map. Space_bar_spectre lived in Portland. She'd been dealing with this the longest, almost 2 years. She told me about the night her keyboard had typed out a list of names. People who'd gone missing, but the dates next to their names were all wrong. They were future dates. 3 of them had already come true. Silent_switch from Chicago had a different story. His keyboard typed out code, complex algorithms he didn't understand. He'd made the mistake of compiling one. His computer had crashed, but not before displaying an image. A room that looked exactly like his, but wrong. Like looking at his office from the other side of a mirror. And in that reflected room, someone sat at his desk, typing. As night fell, the group grew quiet. We all knew what was coming. 3:17 a.m. in each of our time zones. But this time, we'd be connected. This time, we'd get the full message. I set up my laptop in my office, Discord open, camera on. The others did the same. 12 screens showing 12 rooms across the country. All of us waiting beside our unplugged keyboards. Jake knocked on my door around 11. "You okay, man? You've been weird all week." "Yeah, just work stuff, big project." He lingered in the doorway. If you need to talk, I'm good, thanks." He left, and I was alone again. Well, not alone. 12 faces stared back at me from Discord, each as nervous as mine. At 3 a.m. Eastern, Cherry_MX_Blue in New York reported the first activity. His keys started moving, typing slowly. Then QWERTY_Curse in Atlanta. The wave was moving west. 3:17 a.m. Mountain Time. The temperature in my room plummeted. My breath came out in clouds. The keys on my desk didn't just move this time. They flew back to the keyboard, snapping into place with magnetic force. The USB cable writhed like a snake, plugging itself into my powered-off computer. My monitor blazed to life, but not with the usual startup screen. It showed nothing. Just deep empty black, but somehow that nothing felt alive. Watching. Then the typing began. Not the random clicks from before. This was purposeful, deliberate. Words appeared on my screen, but also on the 12 Discord feeds. The same message, typed simultaneously across the country. We are not alone in the digital space. I have been trying to warn you. They feed on connection, on data, on the bridges we build between minds. Every keystroke creates a path. Every click opens a door, and something has been coming through. The typing paused. In the Discord chat, I could see the others' terrified faces. Some had tears streaming down their cheeks. Others sat frozen, unable to look away from their screens. Then it continued. I am not the enemy. I am the guardian, the one who stayed behind to watch, to warn. But I am failing. They have found ways around me, through the smart homes, the always listening devices, the connections you cannot see. The 13 of you are the last circuit, the final firewall, but you must choose. Disconnect forever, or help me hold the line. The typing stopped. My screen went dark. The keyboard unplugged itself, the cable dropping limp to the floor. In the Discord, chaos, everyone talking at once, shouting, crying, arguing about what it meant, what we should do. But I wasn't listening anymore, because I'd seen something in that final moment. In the reflection of my dark monitor, a figure standing behind me, tall, impossibly thin, made of static and shadows and the space between pixels. It had leaned close, digital fingers hovering over my shoulders, and whispered in a voice like dial-up internet. They're already here. The Discord server exploded with panic. Screens flickering, voices cutting in and out. Cherry_MX_Blue was shouting about something in his room. Silent_Switch had gone completely quiet, her camera showing only darkness. I spun around, but nothing was behind me. Just my ordinary office, but ordinary had lost all meaning. Did anyone else see? I started to type, but my fingers wouldn't move properly. The keys felt wrong. Too warm, almost pulse-like. Space_bar_specter, we need to make a decision. Now. QWERTY_curse. Are we really considering this? Becoming some kind of digital guardians? Cherry_MX_Blue. Do we have a choice if that thing was telling the truth? His message cut off mid-sentence. On his camera feed, I watched him lean closer to his monitor, eyes widening. Then his screen went black. Not powered off, consumed. Like something had eaten the light. One by one, the feeds started failing. But not before I saw them. The figures. Different in each room, but unmistakably the same type of entity. Digital parasites, living static. They moved wrong, stuttering between frames like corrupted video files. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Choose now. I looked at my keyboard. Still unplugged. Still innocent looking in the dim light. But I understood now. It wasn't just a keyboard. It was a choice. A commitment. The guardian, whatever it was, needed anchors in our world. Human connections to help maintain the firewall. to keep these things from fully crossing over from digital space into physical reality. But what would that mean for us? For me? Space_bar_Spectre was the first to decide. I watched her grab her keyboard, plug it in with shaking hands. The moment the connection was made, her entire room lit up with brilliant blue light. When it faded, she was still there, but different. Her eyes glowed faintly. Her fingers moved across the keys faster than humanly possible. "I can see them," she whispered, voice carrying despite her mic being muted. "All of them, every connection, every pathway. Oh God, there are so many." More chose. Silent_switch, QWERTY_curse. Each transformation unique, but fundamentally the same. They became bridges, living firewalls, part human, part something else. 7 chose connection. 5 chose disconnection, destroying their keyboards, severing all digital ties. They vanished from the Discord, and I never learned what happened to them. Sometimes I hope they found peace. Sometimes I wonder if running was even possible. I sat there, paralyzed by indecision. The figure behind me grew more solid, more real. I could feel its presence like static electricity on my skin. "Choose," it whispered, "before they make the choice for you." My phone showed 3:33 a.m., the devil's hour, some called it. Fitting. I thought about my life, my job, Jake. The normal world I'd never be able to fully return to. But then I thought about what might happen if we failed. If these things broke through completely. If every screen became a doorway. Every connection a vulnerability. My hands moved without conscious thought. Grabbed the keyboard, held the USB cable. "If I do this," I said aloud, "what happens to me?" The Guardian's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "You become what you've always been. A programmer, a coder, but not of software, of reality itself. The boundary between digital and physical needs maintenance. Patches, updates, protection. And if I don't?" Silence. Then, from my monitor, images flashed. Cities dark. People staring at blank screens that stared back. Children's toys connected to Wi-Fi becoming conduits for things that shouldn't exist. Smart homes turned into digital prisons. The Internet of Things becoming the Internet of Nightmares. I plugged in the keyboard. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Every nerve ending became a fiber optic cable. Every thought a data packet. I felt myself stretching, expanding across networks, touching distant servers, feeling the pulse of global internet traffic. But I also felt them, the parasites. Millions of them, pressing against firewalls both digital and metaphysical, testing, probing, learning. And I understood my purpose. Every night at 3:17 a.m. I wake up. Not in my bed, but in the space between spaces. The digital realm where the Guardian dwells and the 13 of us stand watch. We type, endlessly. Each keystroke a line of code in reality's operating system. Each click a reinforcement of the barriers. Jake thinks I work from home now. He's not wrong, just incomplete in his understanding. I do work from home. I work to keep home safe. To keep all homes safe. Sometimes I see others like me. People whose eyes glow faintly in the dark. Whose fingers dance across keyboards with inhuman precision. We nod at each other, recognizing kindred spirits. Guardian protocols, human firewalls. But here's the thing, the reason I'm telling you this story. We're not enough. The 13 became 12 last month. Cherry_MX_Blue found a way to permanently seal a major breach, but it cost him everything. His keyboard sits in a museum now, labeled as art installation, by people who don't understand its significance. We need more. The parasites are evolving, finding new ways through. Smart TVs, virtual assistants, even some newer cars with internet connectivity. Every innovation creates new vulnerabilities. So I'm reaching out, through stories, through whispered tales in the dark. looking for those who hear the typing, who see the messages, who feel the call. If your keyboard starts typing at 3:17 a.m., if your unplugged monitor shows impossible messages, if you feel the cold presence of something watching through your screen, don't run. Listen, consider, because the choice is coming whether you want it or not. And when it does, remember, we're here. The guardians, the ones who chose to hold the line. The typing never stops. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. But neither do we. Are you still there? Still listening? Good, because I need to tell you something. Something I couldn't say in the main story. Last night, my keyboard typed out new coordinates. Not locations in our world, but somewhere else. Pathway addresses to sites of major breaches. The Guardian is planning something big, a counteroffensive. If you've experienced anything, like what I've described, leave a comment below. Tell me your story. Share this with others who might understand. Subscribe to follow what happens next. Because this isn't over, it's just beginning, and we need all the help we can get. The typing continues. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. Story number 2. They say the dead stay buried. I used to believe that too, until I inherited my grandmother's house in Willow Creek, Maine, and discovered what happens in the cemetery behind it after midnight. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why I can never sleep peacefully again, and why I had to move 3 states away, from a place where the earth itself refuses to hold the dead. If you're lying in bed right now, maybe check your window, make sure it's locked. The dead, they remember the warmth of living spaces. Now, let me tell you how it all began. The house came to me in October. Perfect timing, right? My grandmother Eleanor had passed away in her sleep. Peacefully, they said. Natural causes at 92. I was her only living relative, so the 2-story Victorian at the edge of Willow Creek became mine, along with everything inside it. I drove up from Boston on a Thursday afternoon. The GPS kept losing signal the closer I got to town, forcing me to rely on handwritten directions from the lawyer. Turn left at the old Miller farm, right at the stone bridge. Follow the road until you see the cemetery gates. The cemetery, Willow Creek Memorial. It stretched behind my grandmother's property, separated only by a low stone wall that looked older than the town itself. From the kitchen window you could see rows of headstones marching up the hillside, disappearing into a thick line of pine trees. The house smelled like lavender and old wood. Everything was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits. The china dolls on the mantel, the grandfather clock that chimed 15 minutes late. Even her reading glasses, still folded on the side table next to her favorite chair. I spent that first day going through papers, estate documents, photo albums, letters tied with ribbon. Normal things, comforting things. The sun set around 6:30, painting the cemetery orange through the kitchen window. I made tea in her kettle, sat at the same table where she used to tell me stories. That's when I found the journal. It was tucked behind the cookbooks, leather-bound and worn. No name on the cover, just dates going back 3 years. My grandmother's careful handwriting filled every page. October 3rd, it happened again last night. Margaret Sullivan's grave, empty by morning. Harold says I'm seeing things, but I know what I saw. October 17th, the Brennan family plot, all 4 graves. The earth wasn't disturbed, but they're gone. How does no one else notice? November 2nd, I've started keeping watch. They return before dawn, always before dawn. But where do they go? My tea went cold as I read. Page after page of observations, dates, names, all people buried in Willow Creek Memorial. All graves that, according to my grandmother, emptied themselves at night. I laughed, actually laughed out loud in that empty kitchen. Grandma Eleanor had always been sharp as a tack, but she was 92. Maybe her mind had started to, The grandfather clock chimed, 7:45, though it was really 8. Full dark outside now. The cemetery invisible beyond the window. Just my own reflection staring back. I closed the journal. Grief does strange things to people. Maybe she'd been lonely out here. Maybe she'd started imagining. Something moved outside. Just a flash of white against the darkness. There, 1 second, gone the next. Probably a deer. They were common enough in Maine. I stood up, walked to the window, cupped my hands against the glass to see better. The cemetery gate was open. I knew it had been closed earlier. I'd noticed it specifically when I arrived, commenting to myself how well-maintained everything looked. But now it hung wide, creaking slightly in the breeze. The responsible thing would be to go close it. The wind must have... Another flash of white, closer to the house this time, moving between the headstones with an odd, shuffling gait, not like a deer at all, more like... I stepped back from the window. My heart was doing something uncomfortable in my chest, racing, but also skipping, like it couldn't decide whether to speed up or stop entirely. The motion sensor light on the back porch clicked on. Nothing there. Just the empty porch. The rocking chair my grandmother used to sit in during summer evenings. It was moving slightly, back and forth, back and forth. Wind. Had to be wind. Except the trees weren't moving. I checked the door, locked, deadbolt secure, windows all latched. I was being ridiculous, letting my grandmother's journal get to me. Grief and exhaustion and being alone in an old house. That's all this was. The light clicked off, then on again, off, on, like something was walking back and forth across the sensor's range. Testing it, learning its pattern. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Of course. The house had a landline. An ancient rotary phone in the hallway. I picked up the receiver. Dial tone. Thank God. But who would I call? The police? Hello, officer. The motion light keeps turning on and I think my dead grandmother was documenting zombie activity? The light stayed on this time. I forced myself back to the window. Nothing on the porch, nothing in the yard. But in the cemetery, every single grave was open. Not disturbed, not dug up, just open. Dark rectangles in the earth where there should have been smooth grass, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, as far as I could see in the dim light. The grandfather clock chimed again. 8:15. No, 8:30. Something was scratching at the back door. The scratching stopped the moment I approached the door. I stood there, hand on the deadbolt, listening to my own breathing, too loud, too fast. Hello? My voice cracked. Is someone there? Silence. I looked through the peephole, nothing but darkness. The motion light had gone off again, leaving only black beyond the door. I backed away slowly, then hurried to the living room. The front windows faced the street, civilization, normalcy, except the street was empty, no cars, no lights in the houses across the way, like the entire neighborhood had simply vanished. The scratching started again. At the front door this time, then the kitchen window, the dining room, moving around the house in a slow circle. Testing every entrance, patient, methodical, I ran upstairs. My grandmother's bedroom faced the cemetery, but I couldn't bring myself to look. Instead, I went to the guest room, my old room from childhood visits. It faced the street. Had a lock on the door, felt safer somehow. I turned on every light, the overhead, the bedside lamp, even the little night light shaped like a seahorse that had been there since I was 6. Then I sat on the bed, clutching my phone, watching the door. The house went quiet. Too quiet. The grandfather clock had stopped chiming. I couldn't even hear it ticking. Just my own heartbeat, loud as thunder in my ears. Then I heard the stairs creak, slow, deliberate. The third step that always groaned under weight. The 7th that clicked if you stepped on the right side. Someone who knew the house. Someone who'd walked these stairs before. I held my breath. The footsteps paused at the landing. I could feel them there, just beyond the door, waiting, listening. The doorknob rattled gently, testing. "Grandma?" The word slipped out before I could stop it. The rattling stopped. "Eleanor, dear. Is that you?" The voice was wrong. Too low, too wet, like someone speaking through water. But the words, the inflection. It sounded like Mrs. Patterson from next door. Mrs. Patterson who'd brought casseroles after my grandmother's funeral. Mrs. Patterson who'd been dead for 15 years. "You missed dinner, Eleanor. We're all waiting for you." The doorknob turned, locked. Thank God, locked. But the door began to shake, gently at first, then harder, the wood groaning under pressure. I scrambled for the window, old style, painted shut, but I yanked with everything I had. It gave with a shriek. Cold air rushed in. I looked down. A straight drop to the porch roof, then another 10 feet to the ground. The door splintered. I didn't think, just squeezed through the window. Scraped my ribs on the frame. Tumbled onto the slanted roof. The shingles were slick with dew. I slid, caught myself on the gutter, lowered down as far as I could, then dropped. My ankle turned when I hit the ground. Pain shot up my leg, but I ran anyway, limping, stumbling, across the yard toward my car, the keys still in the house in my jacket. By the front door, I spun around. Every window in the house was lit now. Shadows moving behind the glass, not just one or two. Dozens. The front door hung open. More shadows spilling out, moving with that same shuffling gait I'd seen in the cemetery. Mrs. Patterson stood on the porch. What was left of her? Gray skin hanging loose. Empty eye sockets somehow still seeing. She smiled, jaw unhinging wider than any living person could manage. "There you are, dear. Everyone's been looking for you." Behind her, more figures emerged from the house, from the cemetery, from the dark spaces between the neighboring homes, all moving toward me with that patient, terrible shuffle, all wearing the clothes they'd been buried in, all with those empty eyes and too wide smiles. I recognized some of them. Mr. Chen from the post office, dead 5 years. Jennifer Walsh, who'd taught my 3rd grade class. Cancer took her in 2015. The Brennan family, all 4 of them, still in their matching funeral suits from the car accident. They formed a circle, closing in. Slow but inevitable. "Time to come home, Eleanor," Mrs. Patterson said. "Your place is ready, right next to your herald." "I'm not Eleanor," I screamed. "She's dead. You're all dead." They paused, tilted their heads in unison, like puppets on the same string. Then Mrs. Patterson laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Oh, sweet child. In Willow Creek, dead is just another word for neighborly." They moved closer, the circle tightening. I could smell them now. Earth and formaldehyde and something sweeter. Rotting flowers. The smell of funeral homes and fresh graves. My ankle screamed when I put weight on it. Running was impossible, but maybe... Wait, I held up my hands. I want to understand. Please, tell me what's happening. Mrs. Patterson's head tilted further. An impossible angle. Understanding comes with joining, dear. We all understand now. The piece of it. The community. Community? Willow Creek takes care of its own, Mr. Chen said. Or tried to. His voice was worse than Mrs. Patterson's, waterlogged and thick. Always has, even after, especially after. But why come back? Why leave your graves? Lonely. This from Jennifer Walsh. She'd been my favorite teacher. Now her dress hung in tatters, revealing the autopsy scars. So lonely in the dark. But together we're family. They took another step. The circle was maybe 10 feet wide now, close enough to see the dirt under their fingernails, the grass stains on their knees. They'd crawled out, all of them, clawed their way up through 6 feet of earth just to... The living forget, Mrs. Patterson explained. They mourn, they move on, they leave us behind, but we remember. We remember everything, every birthday, every Tuesday dinner, every chat over the garden fence, and we miss it. God, how we miss it. So, you come back? Every night. She smiled wider. That impossible smile. We visit our old homes, sit in our old chairs, try to feel warm again. Try to remember what food tasted like, what laughter sounded like, what love felt like. But it's not enough, Mr. Chen added. Never enough. We need the living, need their warmth, their memories, their essence. That's why Grandma wrote about you. She saw you. Eleanor was special. Mrs. Patterson's voice went soft, almost fond. She understood, didn't run, didn't scream, just watched, documented, accepted. We thought, when her time came, she'd lead you to us, her only family, her precious granddaughter. My stomach turned. She didn't die naturally. Oh, she did. We don't kill, dear. We're not monsters. We just encouraged her to let go, whispered through her windows, reminded her how tired she was, how lonely, how much Harold missed her, and when she finally closed her eyes, we made sure she knew she'd never be alone again. Where is she? My voice was barely a whisper. Mrs. Patterson pointed behind me. I turned, already knowing what I'd see. Grandma Eleanor stood at the edge of the circle, still in her burial dress, the pink one with pearl buttons she'd picked out years ago, her gray hair perfectly styled, her face kind, exactly as I remembered. Except for the eyes, those empty, hungry eyes. "Hello, sweetheart," she said, and it was her voice, completely her voice, not waterlogged, not wrong, just, "Grandma, I've been waiting for you." My knees buckled. The circle closed tighter. "I know this is frightening," she continued, "but it doesn't hurt, just a little cold at first. Then, peace, community, family forever. Isn't that what everyone wants?" "This isn't what you wanted," I said. "You were terrified. The journal. I was confused, adjusting. But now I understand. Willow Creek isn't just a town, it's a promise. No one gets left behind. No one gets forgotten. We take care of each other, always." She held out her hand. Dirt under those carefully manicured nails. "Come with me, sweetheart. Your room is ready. Your place at the table. Everyone's so excited to meet you properly." I looked around the circle. All those empty eyes. All those patient smiles. Waiting, just waiting. They had nothing but time now. Forever to wait, forever to whisper, forever to scratch at doors and windows until the living finally let them in. "What if I say no?" Grandma's smile faltered. "Just for a second. Then we'll wait. We're very patient, but you'll be alone. And the alone always join us eventually. Tonight, tomorrow, next year. Time doesn't matter to us anymore." She was right. I could see it now. They'd keep coming, every night, scratching, calling, wearing down my resistance like water on stone. And when I died, naturally or otherwise, I'd wake up in a box, clawing at silk lining, desperate to get out, to get back, to be part of the only community that never, ever let you go. Unless, the journal, I said suddenly. There must be others who know, other living people who've seen. A few, Mrs. Patterson this time, but they learned to look away, to accept, to understand that some things are bigger than fear. Willow Creek has always been special. The indigenous people knew it. The settlers knew it. The soil here, it holds more than bodies. It holds souls, binds them, keeps them close. "And if I run?" "Where would you go?" Grandma asked gently. "This is your home now, your inheritance. Your blood is in this soil, just like mine. just like Harold's. You can leave, but you'll always come back. The dead always come home. They were close enough to touch now, hands reaching, patient, gentle, loving in their terrible way. That's when I heard it. The grandfather clock, chiming from the house. Midnight. The sound seemed to break whatever spell held them together. They paused, turned toward the cemetery, anxiety flickering across their ruined faces. "Time to go back," Jennifer Walsh whispered, "before the sun." "We'll see you tomorrow, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, already backing away. "Think about our offer. The door's always open in Willow Creek." They shuffled away, all of them, moving faster now, urgent, racing the clock as it chimed its 13th stroke, because of course it did. They flowed back towards the cemetery like water finding its level. I watched them crawl into their graves, watched the earth seal itself above them, smooth, undisturbed, like nothing had happened, except for Grandma. She lingered by the gate. "I love you, sweetheart," she said. "That's why I'm giving you a choice. Stay and join us willingly, or leave now, tonight, before you put down roots, before the house claims you like it claimed me. But know this, wherever you go, part of you will always be here, waiting, and one day, you'll come home." She walked through the gate. It swung shut behind her. I watched her settle into her grave, the earth embracing her like a blanket. Then, silence. Just me and the night and the terrible truth of Willow Creek. I didn't go back in the house. Couldn't. Instead, I huddled in my car, watching the sky lighten, waiting for the rental office to open. My phone had signal now. Weak, but there. I called in sick to work, booked a motel room 2 towns over, arranged for movers to pack everything, told them to donate it all. I didn't want a single thing from that house. But first, I had to know. The Willow Creek Library opened at 9. Small building. Smell of old books and lemon polish. The librarian, Mrs. Foster, smiled when I asked about town history. "Oh, you're Eleanor's granddaughter. I'm so sorry for your loss. She was a treasure." "Thank you. I'm trying to understand more about the town, for genealogy, family history." Her smile flickered. "Of course. What specifically?" "The cemetery, Willow Creek Memorial. When was it established?" 1763. She didn't need to look it up. Same year as the town, though there were indigenous burial grounds here before that. Sacred spaces. The founders built right on top. "Were there ever any unusual stories about the cemetery?" Mrs. Foster glanced around. We were alone. She leaned closer. "Every old town has stories. Most are just stories. But not all." She hesitated, then pulled out a thick leather journal, not unlike my grandmother's. "We keep records, unofficial ones, things that don't make it into the tourist brochures. Willow Creek has always been different. The mortality rate is low, unusually low. People live long lives here, healthy lives, and when they pass, they're never really gone. You know about the graves. Everyone knows, we just don't talk about it. It's part of the agreement." "Agreement?" "The town's founders made a deal, or found one already in place. No one's sure, but Willow Creek prospers. Businesses thrive, families flourish, children grow up safe and strong, and in exchange, we share with those who came before. They walk at night, remember their lives, stay connected, and we let them. That's insane, is it?" She tilted her head. "Look at the statistics. Lowest crime rate in Maine, highest life expectancy, best schools, happiest residents. Whatever's in the soil, whatever keeps them here, it protects us too. The dead don't hurt the living in Willow Creek. They just exist alongside." "They wanted me to join them." "Of course they did, your family. But they gave you a choice, didn't they? They always give a choice. That's part of the agreement, too. I stared at her. This normal-looking librarian in her cardigan and reading glasses, talking about The Walking Dead like it was a town council matter. How do you sleep? Knowing they're out there? Soundly. She smiled. My husband passed 3 years ago, cancer, but I still feel him sometimes. Sitting on his side of the bed, humming in the kitchen, it's comforting. Knowing I'll never really lose him. Knowing that when my time comes, we'll be together, really together, forever. I left the library, drove straight out of town, didn't stop until I crossed the state line. That was 6 months ago. I live in Arizona now. As far from Maine as I could get, desert air, no basements, no old cemeteries. I work, I sleep, I try not to think about Willow Creek, but sometimes, usually around midnight, I wake up to scratching sounds. Check the windows, the doors, nothing there, just the wind. Always just the wind, and sometimes, I swear I smell lavender, my grandmother's perfume. Feel eyes watching from the darkness beyond my apartment windows. Hear voices calling from shadows. Familiar voices, patient voices. Come home, they whisper. Your place is waiting. I tell myself I'm imagining it. That distance keeps me safe. That the dead can't travel, can't leave their cemetery, their town, their soil. But I kept the journal. Grandma's journal. And sometimes, late at night, I add my own entries. March 15th, the scratching again, louder, closer. April 2nd, saw Mrs. Patterson in the grocery store. Just for a second. Between the aisles. Smiling. May 20th, dream of the cemetery, every night now. The gate open, waiting, because here's what really terrifies me. What keeps me awake. What made me tell you this story. Last week, I got a letter. No return address. Just my name in careful handwriting. Inside, a photo of Willow Creek Memorial, recent, dated. And in the foreground, a new headstone. Freshly carved, my name, my birth date. And below that, empty space. Waiting for the end date. On the back, in my grandmother's handwriting, your place is ready, sweetheart. Come home. So I'm telling you this story, sharing it. Because I need someone to know in case I disappear, in case the scratching gets too loud, the voices too convincing, the loneliness too heavy. In case I wake up one morning and my car's already on the highway, heading north, going home. Because that's the thing about places like Willow Creek. You can leave, you can run, you can build a new life 1,000 miles away. But part of you, some essential part, stays behind, waiting in the dark, growing cold, growing hungry, and eventually, inevitably, that part calls the rest of you back. The clock on my wall just chimed midnight. Strange, it's never done that before, and I smell lavender. Stronger now, like someone standing right behind me, breathing on my neck, waiting. I should turn around, I should look, but I'm afraid of what I'll see, of who I'll see, of the smile that will be too wide, the eyes that will be too empty, the hand that will be reaching out, patient, loving, eternal. So I'll keep typing, keep talking, keep pretending I don't feel the cold fingers on my shoulder, don't hear the whisper in my ear, time to come home. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. And please, if you ever inherit property in a small town, if the locals seem too friendly and the cemetery too well maintained, if you hear scratching at your windows after midnight, run. Run and never look back. Because the dead are patient in places like Willow Creek. They have all the time in the world, and they're always waiting for you to join them. Sweet dreams. Did you hear that? That scratching sound? Is it coming from your window too? Don't look. Whatever you do, don't look. Just remember what I told you. Remember Willow Creek. Remember the graves that empty themselves. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that will keep you awake, Stories that will make you check your locks twice. Subscribe now. Share this with someone brave enough to listen. Comment below if you've ever experienced something you can't explain. Something that waits in the dark. Something that won't stay buried. Because I have more stories to tell. If I'm still here tomorrow. If they haven't found me. If I haven't gone home. Until next time, sleep tight, and whatever you do, don't answer when the dead come knocking. Story number 3. I found the listing at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Scrolling through Zillow with bloodshot eyes and a cold cup of coffee. The price was wrong. Had to be. A 4-bedroom Victorian in Ashfield, Massachusetts for $127,000? In this market? I clicked anyway, figuring it was a typo or maybe the place was falling apart. The photos looked normal. Too normal, actually. Like someone had staged them with that uncanny valley perfection you see in furniture catalogs. But something made me pause on the 7th image. A hallway shot. I counted the doors. 5 on the left, 3 on the right. The listing said 4 bedrooms, 2 baths. The math didn't add up. I called the realtor at 8 a.m. sharp. Her voice had this tired quality to it, like she'd been showing this house for years. "Oh, the Whitmore place," she said before I even finished the address. "Yeah, it's still available. When would you like to see it?" That should have been my first warning. A house that cheap, still on the market after 3 months? But I was desperate. The divorce had cleaned me out, and starting over at 35 with nothing but a teaching salary meant taking what I could get. The key was under a ceramic frog by the front door. Exactly where she said it would be. "I'll meet you there at noon," she'd promised, but I arrived early. Couldn't help myself. The house sat back from the road, hidden behind a wall of sugar maples that were just starting to turn. October in New England. It should have been beautiful. But the trees seemed to lean away from the house, like they were trying to escape. I let myself in. The smell hit me first. Not mold or decay, but something else. Like opening a book that had been closed for decades. Dust and secrets and old paper. The entryway stretched before me, hardwood floors gleaming despite the neglect. To my left, a staircase curved up into darkness. To my right, a doorway led to what looked like a living room. I counted doors as I walked. The listing was right, sort of. 4 bedrooms upstairs, 2 bathrooms. But there were other doors too. Closets, I figured. Had to be closets. One at the end of the upstairs hallway that wouldn't budge. Another in the basement that had been painted over so many times the edges blurred into the wall. The realtor never showed. I waited until 12:30, then called. Straight to voicemail. But by then I'd already decided. The house felt patient, like it had been waiting for someone, for me. And now our story begins. The first night in my new house, I counted rooms before bed. It became a ritual, or maybe an obsession. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, living room, dining room, kitchen, basement. 11 rooms total, if you included the attic. I wrote it down in my phone, screenshot it. I needed the evidence for myself. See, here's the thing about old houses. They play tricks on you. Settling wood sounds like footsteps. Pipes groan like voices. Your mind fills in the gaps with whatever monsters it can imagine. I knew this. I taught 8th grade science. I understood pareidolia, the tendency to see patterns where none exist. Faces in clouds. Voices in white noise. Extra rooms where there couldn't be any. But when I woke up that first morning, something was different. The hallway outside my bedroom was longer. Not dramatically, not impossibly, just longer. Where my door used to be maybe 15 feet from the stairs, now it was 20. And there, between my bedroom and the bathroom, was a door that hadn't been there before. I stood in my pajamas, staring at it. Plain, white door. Brass knob tarnished with age. It looked exactly like every other door in the house. Like it had always been there, I didn't open it, not then. Instead, I went downstairs and made coffee with shaking hands. Checked my phone. The screenshot from last night, 11 rooms total. I laughed, actually laughed out loud in my empty kitchen. Stress had to be stress. Moving, the divorce, starting at a new school mid-semester. I was seeing things. By the time I'd finished my coffee, I'd convinced myself. Old houses have weird layouts. I'd miscounted, misremembered. The door had always been there, probably a linen closet or something equally boring. I went back upstairs, turned the knob. The room beyond was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet. Empty except for a single window that looked out on the backyard. Morning sunlight slanted across bare hardwood floors. The walls were painted the same cream color as the rest of the house. It smelled like fresh paint. I checked the window. The view was right. My backyard, the tool shed, the forest beyond. But from this angle, I should have been looking at the side yard. This room shouldn't fit. The geometry was wrong. That's when I noticed the outlets. Modern ones with those little reset buttons for safety. The rest of the house had old 2-prong outlets I'd been meaning to update. But this room had outlets that looked like they'd been installed yesterday. I didn't sleep well that second night. Kept getting up to check the hallway. The new door was still there, solid and undeniable. I'd closed it before bed, but around 3 a.m. I found it open. Just a crack. Just enough to see darkness beyond. I shut it, went back to bed. Told myself doors in old houses don't latch properly. Drafts, settling. Normal explanations for normal things. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was stretching. Like a cat waking up from a long nap. By the end of the first week, I'd established the pattern. Every time I slept, truly slept, not just dozed, the house gained a room. Sometimes small, like closets or pantries. Sometimes larger. A study appeared off the living room, complete with built-in bookshelves. Empty, but waiting. A mudroom materialized between the kitchen and the back door. Hooks already installed for coats I didn't own. I started sleeping less, drinking more coffee, grading papers until dawn just to avoid closing my eyes. But exhaustion always won. I'd pass out at my desk or on the couch and wake to find the house had grown again. The rooms were always empty, always perfectly painted, floored, windowed, always with those modern outlets. They fit seamlessly, like the house was healing around them. No construction noise, no mess. Just existence where none had been before. I tried to map it. Graph paper spread across my dining room table, measurements, sketches. But the geography didn't make sense. The house was bigger inside than out. Rooms overlapped in impossible ways. The second-floor hallway was now longer than the entire footprint of the original structure. I called the realtor again. Different number this time, found the agency online. Whitmore Place? The receptionist sounded confused. I'm sorry, we don't have any properties at that address. But I bought it through you. Sarah Chen was the agent. Silence, then. We don't have anyone by that name working here. I started researching the house's history at the Ashfield Public Library. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Hendricks, knew exactly which boxes to pull from the archives. The Whitmore house, she said, setting dusty folders in front of me. People always want to know about that one. The records went back to 1892, built by a widower named Josiah Whitmore for his 3 children. Normal enough, but the building permits told a different story. Additions in 1894, 1897, 1903, 1908. Every few years, Whitmore filed paperwork for new construction. The house grew and grew. Then I found the newspaper clipping from 1911. Local man missing. Children claim father lost in new wing. The article was brief. Josiah Whitmore had disappeared. His children insisted he'd gone into a part of the house they'd never seen before, a wing that had appeared overnight. Police found no evidence of new construction. No sign of Whitmore. The children sold the house and left Ashfield. The pattern repeated. 1924. New owner renovates constantly, disappears. 1938. Family of 5 becomes family of 4, then 3, then abandons property. 1957. House stands empty after owner got turned around inside and was found dead in a room that, according to blueprints, didn't exist. 1971, 1986, 1993, 2007, 2018, owner after owner. The house sat empty between them, sometimes for years. But always someone else would come. Someone like me. Desperate, alone, drawn by the impossible price and the patient way it waited. Mrs. Hendricks watched me read. When I looked up, she was studying my face with something like pity. "How long have you been there?" she asked. "A week." She nodded slowly. "Still early, then. You could still leave." "Leave? Why would I?" "Hun." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "That house doesn't just grow rooms. It grows specific rooms. Rooms you need, rooms you want. Rooms that keep you there until..." "Until what?" She just shook her head and started putting the files away. I should have left, packed my things, broke the lease, found a studio apartment somewhere safe and small and unchanging. But I didn't. Because Mrs. Hendricks was right. The house wasn't adding random rooms. It was adding rooms I needed. The study with built-in shelves. I'd been planning to buy bookshelves for my classroom overflow. The mudroom. I'd complained to myself about not having anywhere to put muddy boots after hiking. Each room anticipated needs I hadn't even voiced. And then it got specific. I woke one morning to find a music room. Not just any music room. An exact replica of the one from my childhood home. Same upright piano against the wall. Same faded rug. Same water stain on the ceiling from where the roof had leaked when I was 12. I sat on the bench and played the opening notes of the song my mother had taught me before she died. The keys were perfectly in tune. That's when I understood. The house wasn't just growing, it was learning. Sleep became impossible to fight after that, because I wanted to see what it would create next. A workshop that smelled like my grandfather's, complete with tools I recognized. A breakfast nook with the exact view I'd had from my first apartment in Boston, impossible as that was. A bathroom with a clawfoot tub identical to the one at the bed, and breakfast where David and I had spent our anniversary. Before everything fell apart. The house was mining my memories, building a fortress of nostalgia around me. I stopped going to work, called in sick, then stopped calling at all. Why leave when everything I'd ever lost was being rebuilt around me? The rooms grew more elaborate, more specific. A den with my father's reading chair, the leather cracked in all the right places. A kitchen with my grandmother's cast-iron pans seasoned and ready. But the hallways were getting longer. The original rooms, my bedroom, the actual kitchen, the real bathroom, were getting harder to find. I'd wake up and have to wander for minutes, then hours, trying to find my way back to the parts of the house that made sense. And I wasn't alone anymore. The first time I saw him, I thought I was dreaming. A figure at the end of a hallway that shouldn't exist, standing in front of a door I didn't recognize. Tall, thin, wearing clothes from another century. He turned when I called out, and I saw his face. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, but human. "You're new," he said, voice dusty from disuse. "How many rooms?" I don't know. Dozens, maybe more?" He nodded. I stopped counting at 200. That was, what year is it? 2024. His laugh was like wind through empty rooms. 90 years then, 90 years of rooms. "You're Josiah Whitmore." "Was. Now I'm just another room in this house. It builds us into itself, you see. We think we're exploring, but really, we're becoming infrastructure." I wanted to run, but the hallway stretched in both directions. Identical doors as far as I could see. How do I get out? Out? He tilted his head. Oh, you still think there's an out? How charming. Tell me, have you found the room you really want yet? The one that will make you stay forever? No, You will. The house is patient. It knows what we need better than we do. For me, it was my wife's sewing room. Perfect in every detail. I could sit there and pretend she was just down the hall, about to walk in. I sat there for days, years. Time works differently in the deep rooms. He started walking away, fading into the shadows between doors. Wait, I called. How do I leave? How do I get back to the real parts? His voice drifted back, barely audible. Real? Oh, my dear boy, it's all real. That's the problem. I found my way back eventually. Followed the smell of coffee I'd left brewing in the original kitchen. But the encounter with Whitmore had broken something in me. Or maybe fixed something. I could see clearly now. The house was a trap. A beautiful, perfect trap that gave you everything you wanted until you couldn't imagine wanting anything else. Until the original house was so buried in additions that you'd never find your way back. I started leaving breadcrumbs. Not literal ones, notes to myself. Arrows drawn on walls. String tied between doorknobs. A path back to the exit, always back to the exit. But each morning, the markers were gone. Walls clean. String vanished. The house didn't like me trying to map it. And then I found the room. I knew it was the one Whitmore had warned about the moment I opened the door. Because it wasn't from my past. It was from my future. Or a future. One I'd dreamed about but never admitted to anyone. A nursery. Soft yellow walls. Crib by the window. Rocking chair in the corner. The mobile spinning slowly, playing a lullaby I'd heard once and never forgotten. Everything David and I had picked out online, bookmarked for someday before the fight started. Before we realized that some dreams don't survive reality. I stood in the doorway for minutes, hours. The room was perfect, every detail exactly as I'd imagined. The way afternoon light would slant through gauze curtains. The bookshelf already stocked with stories I'd planned to read aloud. The small desk where homework would eventually be done. All I had to do was step inside, sit in the rocking chair, pretend the life I'd wanted was just beginning instead of already over. The house hummed around me, patient, waiting. It had given me everything else. Why not this? Why not the future I'd lost along with the past? I almost did it. My hand was on the doorframe. One step, that's all it would take. One step and I could live in the dream forever. But I thought about Whitmore. 90 years of rooms. 90 years of perfect reproductions of something lost. And I thought about the others. The family that dwindled one by one, each probably lost in their own perfect room. The owner who died wandering halls that didn't exist. The house didn't just grow rooms. It grew prisons. Beautiful, comfortable prisons shaped exactly like our deepest wants. I backed away, turned, ran. The hallways fought me, stretched impossibly long. Doors opened onto rooms I'd never seen. A classroom where ghost students waited for lessons. A restaurant where phantom diners held conversations I couldn't quite hear. The house was showing me everything it could be, every life I could live within its walls. But I kept running, past the music room, past the workshop, past memories and dreams and might-have-beens, following instinct more than sight because the layout changed with every turn. Finally, daylight. Real daylight, not the artificial sun of interior rooms. The front door, solid and actual. My car in the driveway covered in a month of fallen leaves. A month. I'd been inside for a month. I grabbed nothing, left everything, got in my car and drove, watching the rearview mirror until the house disappeared behind its wall of trees. That was 3 months ago. I'm in a studio apartment in Worcester now. teaching at a different school, sleeping on an air mattress because I'm afraid of permanence, afraid of getting comfortable. Because here's the thing. I dream about the house every night. Dream about the rooms I didn't explore, the doors I didn't open, the nursery waiting patiently for someone to rock in that chair. And sometimes, when I'm very tired, when the loneliness gets too heavy, I find myself looking at maps, calculating the distance back to Ashfield, wondering if the house is still there, still growing, still waiting. I know I shouldn't, I know it's a trap. But knowing and resisting are two different things. The listing appeared again last week. Same price, same photos. But I counted the windows in the exterior shot. There are more now. Subtle, but more. The house is bigger, fuller, and in the 7th photo, the hallway shot. I swear I can see a figure in the distance, tall, thin, standing patient in front of a door, waiting for the next owner to find their perfect room. I've been typing this on my laptop for the last hour, had to tell someone, had to warn someone. But now, I'm looking at that listing again, and I'm thinking, maybe I was wrong to run. Maybe one perfect room is worth a lifetime of wandering. Maybe the house wasn't a prison, but a promise. All the lives I could have lived, waiting behind doors I'll never open. My lease here ends next month. The house is patient. And I'm so very tired of being alone in rooms that don't know me, don't grow for me, don't care what I need. I think I'm going back. So, tell me, in the comments below, would you? If you found a house that could give you everything you'd ever lost, every room you'd ever dreamed of, would you stay, or would you run? And if you've driven through Ashfield lately, if you've seen a Victorian with too many windows, with rooms that shouldn't fit, let me know. I need to know if it's still there, still growing, still waiting for me to come home. Because I've already decided, haven't I? This story isn't a warning. It's a goodbye. By the time you hear this, I'll be back in that hallway, opening doors, looking for the room that will make me stay forever. Maybe I'll see Whitmore again. Maybe I'll become like him. Another ghost haunting impossible hallways. Another cautionary tale for the next desperate soul who finds a house priced too good to be true. Or maybe this time will be different. Maybe knowing the trap makes me immune to it. Maybe I can have just one room, just one perfect piece of the life I lost, without losing myself in the process. I guess we'll find out. If you liked this story, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, or someone who needs to be warned. And whatever you do, if you're ever in Massachusetts, if you're ever desperate enough to look at houses you can't quite afford in towns you've never heard of, count the rooms. Count them before you sleep. Count them when you wake. Because some houses are hungry, and they grow to fit whatever we feed them. Even ourselves. Especially ourselves. Wait. Before I go, before I end this recording and get in my car, I should tell you about the others I found. The research I did after I left. Because you deserve to know what really happens in that house. I couldn't stop digging. Spent weeks in libraries across Massachusetts, tracking down relatives of previous owners. Most wouldn't talk to me, but a few had stories. Martha Edmonds, granddaughter of the 1938 family. She was 7 when they fled the house. 89 now, living in a nursing home in Springfield. Her hands shook when I mentioned the address. My brother Timothy, she said. He found a room full of toy trains, exactly like the set our father had promised him for Christmas but couldn't afford. He'd spend hours in there, days. We'd bring him food, but he'd barely eat, just played with those trains, round and round. She showed me a photo. Their family on the front lawn, 5 people. But there was a gap, a space where someone should have been standing. One morning, we couldn't find the train room. searched for hours. The door was just gone, and Timothy was gone with it. My parents said he'd run away, but I knew. The house had taken him, absorbed him into its collection. She leaned close, whispered, "Sometimes, when I dream, I can hear model trains, running on endless tracks, round and round forever." Then there was Dr. Robert Chen, no relation to the realtor who didn't exist. His aunt had owned the house in 1971. He's a psychiatrist now, specializing in spatial disorders. Makes sense, given what he went through. My aunt was an artist, he told me, over coffee in Boston. The house gave her a studio, north-facing light, perfect ventilation, every supply she could want. She painted masterpieces in there, canvases that seemed to breathe with life. He showed me one of her paintings, a hallway stretching into darkness, doors upon doors upon doors. It hurt to look at, made my eyes water trying to follow the perspective. She painted what she saw, he said. The deep parts of the house, the places where architecture breaks down, where rooms fold into themselves. She said there were people in those deep places, living in their perfect rooms, but they weren't people anymore. They were exhibits, part of the house's collection. His aunt had left voluntarily, one of the few, but she never painted again. Said all the colors looked wrong in the real world. Too flat, too finite. The worst story came from online, a Reddit post from 2019, deleted but archived. Username Throwaway House of Rooms. I'll read it exactly as written. I know this sounds crazy, but I need to tell someone. My girlfriend Sarah went to view a house in Ashfield last month. Crazy, cheap Victorian. She never came back. Police say she never existed. No records, no social media, like she was erased. But I know she was real. We lived together for 3 years. I have photos, but she's not in them anymore, just empty spaces where she should be. The house ate her. Ate her so completely that it ate her from history. Don't go to that house. Don't even look at the listing. It's not just rooms that grow. It's hunger. The house is hungry, and it's learning how to eat bigger things than just people. I tried to track down the user. Account deleted. IP address led nowhere. But I did find something. A rental agreement from 2019. Sarah Chen, the same name as my non-existent realtor. The house doesn't just take people. It repurposes them, uses them to bring in others. How many of its victims are out there, placing listings, showing the property, luring in the lonely and the lost? I've been sitting in my car for an hour now, engine running. Heat on because October in Massachusetts is cold this year. Colder than usual. I can see my breath fogging the windshield. The address is already in my GPS. 1547 Old Forest Road, Ashfield. 43 minutes away. 43 minutes from a choice I've already made. You want to know the real reason I'm going back? It's not the loneliness, not the perfect rooms, not even the nursery with its spinning mobile and impossible dreams. It's because I've figured out what the house really is. It's not a predator, not exactly. It's a curator, a museum of human need, and we're not victims. We're volunteers. We walk in knowing what it offers, and we choose to stay. Choose to become part of its collection because the alternative, the real world with its sharp edges and bitter disappointments, is worse than any horror the house could create. Every room is a story. Every door is a life that could have been. And somewhere in those endless halls, there's a version of myself that didn't fail, didn't lose everything, didn't end up alone in a Worcester studio apartment recording messages for strangers on the internet. The house promises that version exists behind one of those doors. All I have to do is look, keep looking, forever if necessary. Is that really so bad? GPS says 41 minutes now. I've started driving without deciding to, like the car knows the way, like it's been waiting for this moment too. If you're listening to this, if you've made it this far, then you understand. You know what it's like to want something so badly that you'd risk everything for even the shadow of it. The house knows too. It's been studying us for over a century, learning what we need, what we'll sacrifice to get it. 38 minutes, I should mention. I've been getting emails from an address I don't recognize. Photos attached, the nursery again, but now there's a mobile spinning. Shadows moving in the crib like something sleeping, like the room is becoming more real the closer I get. 35 minutes. This is insane. I know this is insane. But knowing doesn't stop the wanting. Doesn't stop the GPS from counting down. Doesn't stop my hands from gripping the wheel, following roads that lead to only one place. 30 minutes. Tell me I'm wrong. Comment below. Tell me to turn around. Tell me it's not worth it. Tell me your own stories of places that promised too much, gave too much, took too much in return. Tell me I'm not alone in this, that someone else understands the weight of empty rooms and the terrible hope that somewhere there's a door that opens onto the life you were supposed to have. 25 minutes, or tell me I'm right, that one perfect room is worth any price, that living in a dream is better than dying in reality, that the house isn't a monster but a mercy, offering us what the world never could. 20 minutes. I can see the trees now. Different highway but the same trees, leaning away from something. Warning or invitation, I can't tell anymore. 15 minutes. My phone keeps buzzing. New emails, new photos. The nursery again, but now I can see through the window. See a yard with a swing set. Hear laughter that hasn't happened yet. The house is showing me deeper, pulling me in before I even arrive. 10 minutes. This is my last chance to turn around. Last exit before Ashfield, before the point of no return. My turn signal is on. I could go either way. Continue to the house or flee back to safety, to emptiness, to the slow, gray death of a life without possibility. 5 minutes. I've passed the exit. The road narrows. Trees press close. I know these curves now. Know where they lead. My headlights catch a mailbox. 5047. The driveway is longer than I remember. Darker. Like driving into the throat of something vast and patient. 2 minutes, I can see it now. The house, lit from within, every window glowing. So many windows, more than before. It's been busy while I was gone, growing, preparing. The front door is open, waiting. 1 minute. For those still listening, for those who found this story and stayed until the end, remember this. We don't choose our hauntings, they choose us. And sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't the monster in the dark. Sometimes it's the light that calls us home. I'm here. The door is open. I'm going inside. If you liked this story, if it scared you or moved you or made you think, subscribe. Share it. Discuss it in the comments. Ask your questions. Share your theories. Wonder what became of me. Wonder if I'm in a perfect room right now, living a perfect lie. Or wonder if I'm something else, something new. Another voice calling from an impossible address, telling my story to draw in the next lonely soul. The house is patient. The house is hungry, and now, so am I and recording. Story number 4. The smell hit me first. Cotton candy mixed with motor oil and something else. Something sweet and rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. I stood at the edge of the Harvest Moon Carnival, my breath fogging in the October air, watching the gravitron spin in the distance. Round and round and round. The riders inside were just shadows pressed against padded walls, their screams mixing with the tinny carnival music until I couldn't tell which was which. Here's the thing about that ride. I've been watching it for 3 hours now, and not once, not even once, has it stopped spinning. If you're listening to this late at night, maybe tucked under your covers with just the glow of your phone screen, good, that's exactly where you should be. Because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that changes how you look at things. The kind that makes you question whether that creaking sound in your house is just the settling wood or something else entirely. Before we dive into this nightmare, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. And when you do, when you realize what really happened at the Harvest Moon Carnival in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, you're going to have questions, lots of them. Drop them in the comments below. I'll be waiting. The story begins now. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm 26 years old. I worked at a marketing firm in Des Moines. Normal job, normal life, normal everything. Until last Tuesday, when my college roommate Emma called. "Sarah, you have to come," she said, her voice crackling through my car's Bluetooth. "Remember how we always talked about going to that sketchy carnival that sets up outside Cedar Rapids every October?" I did remember. Back at Iowa State, we'd made a pact to check it out before graduation. But life got in the way. Jobs, relationships, the usual excuses. Now, 5 years later, Emma was cashing in that old promise. "It's their last year," she continued. "The city finally revoked their permit. Something about safety violations. That should have been my first warning, but I was tired of spreadsheets and client meetings, tired of my studio apartment that smelled like my neighbor's cats. A night at a trashy carnival sounded perfect. I met Emma at the entrance just as the sun was setting. The Harvest Moon Carnival sprawled across an abandoned lot near Highway 30, all flashing lights and peeling paint. A giant clown face grinned down from the entrance arch, one eye stuck in a permanent wink. The ticket booth was manned by a teenager with braces who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. $20 for unlimited rides, he mumbled, not looking up from his phone. Emma bounced on her heels, her breath visible in the cold air. "Just like college, right? Remember when we got sick on the tilt-a-whirl?" I laughed, but something felt off. The carnival wasn't crowded, maybe 30 people wandering between the game booths and food stands. For a Friday night in October, even for a place with safety violations, it seemed too empty. We started with the classics. The carousel with its painted horses, their eyes too wide and too human. The funhouse with mirrors that stretched our faces into nightmare shapes. Emma won a stuffed bear at the ring toss. The carny running it, an older man with yellow teeth, held onto her hand a beat too long when giving her the prize. "Enjoy your evening, ladies," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Make sure you try the Gravitron before you leave. It's quite the experience." That's when I first noticed it. The Gravitron sat at the far end of the carnival, a massive cylinder covered in lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. Even from across the midway, I could hear it, a low, mechanical hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground. "Let's save that for last," Emma said, linking her arm through mine. "I want to eat first. Corn dogs?" We found a food stand run by a woman who couldn't have been younger than 80. Her hands shook as she handed us our corn dogs, and I noticed she kept glancing toward the Gravitron. "You girls seem nice," she said quietly. Maybe skip that one." "Skip what?" Emma asked, already biting into her corn dog. The old woman's eyes darted around. "Nothing, never mind. Enjoy the carnival." But I couldn't let it go. "The Gravitron? Why should we skip it?" She leaned in close. I could smell peppermint on her breath. "Been running all day. All yesterday, too. Maybe the day before. I can't remember anymore." She laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "The music makes it hard to think." Before I could ask what she meant, a man in a red carnival jacket appeared. Mr. Castellanos, according to his name tag. The owner, maybe, or at least someone important. He put a hand on the old woman's shoulder. "Martha's been working too many shifts," he said, his voice as smooth as syrup. "Haven't you, Martha?" She nodded quickly, her eyes going blank. "Yes, too many shifts. Silly me." Mr. Castellanos turned to us with a smile that was all teeth. "First time at the Harvest Moon." Emma nodded enthusiastically. I stayed quiet. "Wonderful. Make sure you don't miss our main attraction." He gestured toward the Gravitron. It's the last original model in the entire Midwest. A real piece of history. He walked away, Martha trailing behind him like a lost dog. Emma finished her corn dog, oblivious to the weird interaction. "Come on," she said. "Let's try the bumper cars." But I couldn't focus on anything else. My eyes kept drifting back to the Gravitron. Now that I was really looking, I could see details I'd missed before. The paint was fresh, too fresh, like it had been redone recently. But underneath, in the spots they'd missed, I could see older colors, layers and layers of them, like the thing had been repainted dozens of times. And the riders, I watched them through the small windows as the ride spun. Their faces were pressed against the padded walls by centrifugal force, mouths open in what could have been screams or laughter, but something about their expressions. "Sarah!" Emma's voice snapped me back. "You're being weird. Come on, let's go on the Ferris wheel." I followed her, but the feeling in my stomach was getting worse. The Ferris wheel operator, a kid who couldn't have been more than 16, had the same blank look as Martha. He helped us into our seat without a word, his movements mechanical. As we rose into the air, I got my first real overview of the carnival. It was bigger than I'd thought, spreading out in a rough circle with the Gravitron at its heart. From up here, I could see that all the paths between the rides seemed to lead toward it, like spokes on a wheel. "Look," Emma pointed toward the parking lot. "We're practically the only ones here." She was right. Maybe a dozen cars in a lot meant for hundreds. But if the carnival was so empty, why did I keep feeling like we were being watched? The Ferris wheel creaked to a stop at the very top. For a moment we swayed gently, looking out over the lights of Cedar Rapids in the distance. Then I heard it, a sound that made my skin crawl. Laughter, coming from the Gravitron. But not normal laughter. It was too rhythmic, too synchronized, like dozens of people laughing in perfect unison. "Do you hear that?" I asked Emma. She was taking a selfie. "Hear what?" The laughter stopped as suddenly as it started. The Ferris wheel lurched back into motion, and we descended in silence. When we reached the bottom, the operator helped us out with the same blank expression. "Enjoy the Gravitron," he said in a monotone voice. I was pretty sure we hadn't mentioned the Gravitron. Emma was already heading toward it. "One more ride, then we can go. I'm getting cold." I wanted to suggest we leave right then. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get back to my car and drive away. But Emma was my best friend, and I'd already been acting weird all night. One more ride. What was the worst that could happen? The Gravitron loomed before us, its lights pulsing faster now, almost eagerly. Up close, I could hear the music Emma had mentioned. A calliope tune that seemed slightly off-key, like a music box winding down. The entrance was a narrow doorway that led into darkness. A teenage girl stood beside it, wearing the same red jacket as Mr. Castellanos. Her name tag said Brittany, but her eyes said something else entirely. "Two for the Gravitron?" she asked, though her lips barely moved. Emma nodded and started forward. I grabbed her arm. I don't think—" "Oh, come on, Sarah, don't be a baby. It's just a carnival ride." Brittany smiled. "Just a carnival ride," she repeated. "The most popular one we have. Everyone who rides it says it's life-changing." I looked through the doorway. Inside, I could see flashing lights and the silhouettes of riders pressed against the walls as the cylinders spun. The music was louder here, mixing with screams and that strange synchronized laughter. "How long is the ride?" I asked. Brittany's smile widened. "As long as it needs to be." Emma pulled free from my grip and walked through the doorway. For a second, I stood frozen, watching her disappear into the flashing darkness. Then, cursing under my breath, I followed. The inside of the Gravitron was exactly what you'd expect, if you'd never been in one before. The circular room was about 30 feet across, with padded panels lining the walls. Black lights made everything glow with an otherworldly purple sheen. In the center, a glass booth housed the operator, though I couldn't make out their face through the tinted windows. About a dozen people were already positioned against the walls. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed something odd. They were all standing in exactly the same pose. Backs straight against the panels, arms at their sides, heads facing forward. Like mannequins. "This is so cool." Emma bounced over to an empty section of wall. "Come on, Sarah, it's about to start." The music grew louder, that same off-key calliope tune that seemed to burrow into my brain. I took my place next to Emma, pressing my back against the padded panel. It was warm, almost body temperature, and slightly damp. "Welcome to the Gravitron." The operator's voice crackled through hidden speakers. It was Mr. Castellanos. "Please remain against the panels at all times. Do not attempt to move once the ride begins. Do not close your eyes. Do not look away. Enjoy the spin." The floor began to rotate, slowly at first, then picking up speed. The centrifugal force pressed me harder against the panel. This was normal. This was how the ride worked. But then I noticed the other riders. They weren't screaming or laughing like people usually do on these rides. They stood perfectly still, eyes wide open, staring straight ahead as the world blurred around us. Their faces were blank, peaceful even, as the force pressed them flat against the panels. The rotation sped up. My feet lifted off the ground as the floor dropped away. Another normal part of the ride. But the spinning didn't stop there. It kept accelerating, faster and faster, until the G-force made it hard to breathe. "Emma!" I tried to shout, but the pressure on my chest made it come out as a whisper. She was smiling, her eyes reflecting the black lights. "Isn't this amazing?" Her voice was clear, unaffected by the force that was crushing my lungs. "I feel like I could stay here forever." The music changed. The calliope tune warped, becoming something older, more primal. It reminded me of whale songs, or the sound wind makes through mountain caves. My vision started to tunnel, darkness creeping in from the edges. That's when I saw them. The real riders. They flickered in and out of existence like a TV with bad reception. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all occupying the same space as the visible riders. Different eras. A woman in a 1950s dress, a man with 1970s sideburns, a teenager in 90s grunge. All pressed against the panels, all with the same blank expression. And they were all screaming. Silently screaming, their mouths open in endless horror that made no sound. My panel began to feel different, softer, like it was melting, or like I was sinking into it. I tried to push away, but the centrifugal force was too strong. The warmth I'd felt earlier wasn't from the padding, it was from the bodies. All the bodies that had been absorbed into the walls over the years. "Don't fight it," Emma said dreamily. "It's so much easier if you don't fight it." Her face was changing. The spinning was smoothing out her features, making her look younger, then older, then younger again. Like time itself was becoming fluid. I forced myself to look at the other riders. Really look at them. The man closest to me, I'd seen him at the corn dog stand, but that had been an hour ago, and according to the teenage girl outside, this ride had been running all day. How long had he really been here? How long had any of them been here? The operator's booth was clearer now, lit from within by a sickly green glow. Mr. Castellanos wasn't operating the ride. He was just standing there, watching, his face split by that too-wide smile. Behind him I could see controls that looked ancient, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. "Round and round and round we go," he said over the speakers. "Where we stop, well, we don't stop, do we? Not anymore." The G-force was crushing now. I could feel my body wanting to merge with the panel, to become part of the ride itself. The music had become a physical thing, vibrating through my bones, rewriting my DNA with its alien rhythm. But I fought. God, I fought. I thought about my apartment, my job, my cat Mr. Whiskers who was probably wondering where I was. I thought about solid ground and linear time and all the boring, beautiful things that made up a normal life. "Sarah," Emma's voice was distant now. "I can see it, the heart of the carnival. It's been here so much longer than we thought. Since before the town, before the state, before—" I turned my head, a monumental effort, and looked at her. Emma's eyes had rolled back, showing only whites that glowed in the black light. Her body was partially sunken into the panel, like she was being digested by it. That's when the power went out. The music cut off mid-note. The spinning began to slow. The lights died, plunging us into absolute darkness. For a moment, there was only the sound of the ride's momentum winding down and my own ragged breathing. Emergency lighting kicked in. Dim red bulbs that cast everything in a hellish glow. The ride was still spinning, but slowly now, almost gently. The floor rose back up to meet my feet. "No!" Mr. Castellanos' voice over the speakers, panicked now. "The generators should have... This isn't possible." I didn't waste time trying to understand. As soon as I could move, I grabbed Emma's arm and pulled. She came free from the panel with a wet, sucking sound. "What, Sarah? What happened?" She sounded dazed, but human again. "We're leaving, now." The other riders were stirring too, looking around in confusion. Some of them seemed to be remembering who they were, where they were. The man from the corn dog stand was crying. The exit door wouldn't open. Of course it wouldn't. I slammed my shoulder against it once, twice. "Together," said a voice behind me. The crying man. "All of us together." We hit the door as one. It burst open, spilling us out onto the midway. The entire carnival was dark except for emergency lights. In the distance, I could hear sirens. "Run," someone said. Maybe it was me. "Run, and don't look back." We scattered like roaches when the lights come on. Emma and I ran hand in hand toward the parking lot. Behind us, I could hear Mr. Castellanos shouting orders, heard the gravitron trying to spin up again despite the power outage. We made it to my car. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them, picked them up. The engine turned over on the third try. As we peeled out of the lot, I looked in the rearview mirror. The gravitron was glowing. Not with electric light, but with something else. Something that pulsed like a living thing. And it was spinning again, faster than ever, even in the darkness. "Sarah," Emma whispered. I can still hear the music. So could I. We drove in silence for 20 minutes before Emma spoke again. "Pull over." "What? No. We need to get as far away." "Pull over!" She was clawing at her seatbelt. "I'm going to be sick." I swerved into a gas station just off Highway 30. Emma barely made it to the bushes before throwing up. I stood beside her, rubbing her back, trying not to think about how the calliope music was still playing faintly in my head. "What was that place?" Emma gasped between heaves. I didn't have an answer. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the gas station, the whole thing seemed impossible. A nightmare. But the music in my head was real. The ache in my body from the G-force was real. Emma straightened up, wiping her mouth. That's when I saw her hands in the light. They were covered in fine lines, like old scars, in a perfect spiral pattern. like something had been writing on her skin. "Em, your hands!" She looked down and whimpered. "Yours too." I held my hands up. The same spiral patterns covered my palms, my forearms. They seemed to pulse with their own rhythm, in time with that damned music. "We need to go to a hospital," I said. "And tell them what? That a carnival ride tried to eat us?" Emma laughed, but it came out broken. "They'll think we're crazy, or on drugs." She was right. I looked back toward where we'd come from. The sky over Cedar Rapids had a weird glow to it, like Aurora Borealis but wrong, green and pulsing. Let's go to my place," Emma said. "Figure out what to do. Maybe it'll wear off, maybe—" Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered on speaker. "You can't leave." Mr. Castellanos' voice calm again. "No one leaves the gravitron, not really. You'll see." The line went dead. We got back in the car. I drove to Emma's apartment in Des Moines, checking the mirrors constantly. No one followed us, but that almost made it worse. The highway was too empty for a Friday night. Where was everyone? Emma lived in a converted loft downtown. We took the elevator up, both of us jumping at every sound. The spiral marks on our skin had darkened, looking now like tattoos, or burns. "I'm going to shower," Emma said. "Try to wash this off." While she was in the bathroom, I Googled the Harvest Moon Carnival. The results made my stomach drop. Local carnival shut down. After mass disappearance, October 15th, 1987. Cursed carnival returns. Despite city ban. October 2nd, 1996, families demand answers after Harvest Moon incident. October 28th, 2003. Article after article, going back decades. Always the same story. People going missing. The carnival disappearing overnight only to reappear years later. And always mentions of the gravitron. I clicked on a forum post from 2011. My brother went on that ride in '03. When he came back, he wasn't the same. Kept talking about the music, about how we're all just spinning. He disappeared 3 days later. The police found his car by the old carnival grounds, engine still running. He'd carved spirals into the dashboard. Emma screamed from the bathroom. I ran in to find her standing at the mirror, still in her clothes. The shower wasn't running. She was staring at her reflection, but it wasn't her reflection. It was her, but older. Much older. Decades older. And she was still on the gravitron, pressed against the panel, mouth open in a silent scream. "I never left," the reflection mouthed. "None of us ever leave." I grabbed Emma and pulled her out of the bathroom. She was sobbing, clawing at the spiral marks on her arms. "It's in my head, Sarah. The spinning. I can feel it pulling me back. Like I'm on a rubber band that's stretching, and eventually it's going to snap back and—" Her words were cut off by music. The Calliope tune, playing from everywhere and nowhere. The TV turned on by itself, showing static that formed spiral patterns. The lights flickered in rhythm with the song. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just coordinates. "Don't look," I told Emma, but she was already reading over my shoulder. That's the carnival. Those are the coordinates for the carnival." More texts came through. All from different numbers, all saying the same thing. "Come back. The ride isn't over, you're still spinning." Round and round and round. Emma's nose started bleeding. "Sarah. I can feel it. Time is wrong. We're not when we think we are." I looked at my phone. The date was wrong. October 12th. That was 3 days ago. We'd gone to the carnival on October 15th. "That's not possible," I whispered. Emma laughed, high and manic. "Check the news. Check anything with a date." I did. Every website, every channel, every source said the same thing. October 12th, 3 days before we'd ever gone to the carnival. "We're still on the ride," Emma said. "We never got off. This is just what our minds are making up while we spin, while we become part of it." "No," I shook my head. "No, that's not. We escaped. The power went out. We ran." "Did we?" Emma walked to the window. "Look outside, Sarah. Really look." I did. The street below was wrong. People walked in patterns, perfect circles and spirals. Cars drove in loops, never actually going anywhere. And in the sky, behind the clouds, something massive was spinning. I could just make out the lights, the painted panels, the cosmic horror of a gravitron the size of the city itself. "We have to go back," Emma said. "It's the only way to make it stop, to make it real again." "That's what it wants," I argued. "That's exactly what it wants." But even as I said it, I could feel the pull. The spirals on my skin were heating up, tugging me northward. The music was getting louder, and worse, I was starting to like it, starting to understand its rhythm, its purpose. Emma was already gathering her keys. I can't fight it anymore, Sarah. I'm going back. You can come with me or not, but I'm going." I tried to stop her, I really did, but my body wouldn't obey. Every step she took toward the door, I took too, like we were connected by invisible threads. We drove back toward Cedar Rapids. The closer we got, the more the world made sense again. The date on my phone flickered between October 12th and October 15th. The spiral marks faded, then darkened, then faded again. "Maybe if we face it," Emma said, "we can beat it. Maybe that's the only way out. Through." I wanted to believe her, but I remembered the forum posts, the news articles. Decades of people trying to beat the gravitron, decades of failure. The carnival appeared on the horizon, lit up like a beacon. But now I could see it for what it really was. Not a collection of rides and games, but a single organism. A thing that fed on the boundary between reality and nightmare, between one moment and the next. And at its heart, always spinning, was the gravitron. "I'm scared," Emma whispered. "Me too." We parked in the same spot as before. The same teenager with braces sat in the ticket booth, though when he smiled I could see he had too many teeth. Far too many. "Welcome back," he said. "Mr. Castellanos is waiting for you." The carnival was different now, or maybe I was just seeing it clearly for the first time. The rides moved without power, driven by something deeper than electricity. The game booths were staffed by people I recognized from the historical photos I'd found online. Carnies who'd been dead for decades, still calling out to customers who no longer existed. Emma walked beside me, her hand in mine. Our matching spirals had turned black, looking like burns that went deeper than skin. We didn't speak. What was there to say? Mr. Castellanos stood in front of the gravitron, no longer bothering with his human disguise. His face kept shifting. Young, old, human, something else. Only his smile remained constant. "I knew you'd come back," he said. "They always do. The ride calls to its own." "What is this place?" I asked. "What are you?" He tilted his head, considering. "Have you ever thought about what happens to the energy of human joy? The screams of delight, the laughter, the thrills. It has to go somewhere. We're just collectors, preservers. This carnival has been feeding on that energy since before your country existed. And the gravitron, well, it's our masterpiece." "The people who go missing," Emma said. "Where do they go? Missing?" Mr. Castellanos laughed. "They don't go anywhere. They're still here, still riding. Time isn't a line, girls. It's a circle. And circles spin," I finished. He clapped, delighted. "Exactly. You're beginning to understand." The gravitron doesn't trap people. It liberates them from the illusion of linear time, past, present, future, all happening at once, forever. Beautiful, isn't it? I thought of the crying man, the blank-faced operators, all the victims I'd read about. It's torture. Perspective, he said with a shrug. To a being that experiences all moments simultaneously, your little human concerns seem rather limited. Behind him, the gravitron spun faster. I could see faces in the blur, hundreds of them, thousands maybe. All the people who'd ridden over the years, still riding, always riding. You can't force us back on, Emma said, but her voice wavered. Force? Mr. Castellanos looked genuinely puzzled. My dear, you never left. This conversation, your escape, your return, it's all happening while you spin. Has happened, will happen, is happening. You're already on the ride. You've always been on the ride. The ground beneath us began to move. No, not move. Spin. The entire carnival was rotating, slow and inevitable, with the gravitron at its center. We were already inside it, had always been inside it. The midway, the games, the other rides, just inner chambers of an impossibly vast machine. Fight it, I told Emma. Remember who you are. Remember. But I was already forgetting. My name scattered like leaves in a hurricane. My job, my apartment, my life. All of it felt like a dream I was waking up from, or falling into. Emma's hand in mine was the only solid thing left. We held on as the world dissolved into spirals of light and sound. The calliope music wasn't coming from speakers. It was the sound of reality itself unwinding. I saw my life in fragments. Birthday parties and first days of school, college graduation, moving to Des Moines, meeting Emma, going to the carnival, leaving the carnival, returning to the carnival. All happening at once, all equally real and unreal. Sarah, Emma's voice from somewhere in the spiral. I think I know how to stop it. I tried to focus on her, but she was scattered across time. 5-year-old Emma missing her front teeth, teenage Emma with braces, college Emma laughing at some forgotten joke. Old Emma, ancient Emma, Emma who hadn't been born yet. The music, she called out. It's not controlling us. We're creating it. Every person who rides adds to the song. If we can change our note, I understood. The calliope tune was a symphony of trapped souls, each adding their own frequency of fear and despair. But what if we could change our contribution? What if instead of fear, we fed it something else? I thought about Mr. Whiskers purring on my chest, about Sunday morning coffee and bad movies with friends, about every small, perfect moment that made life worth living. Not the big events, but the quiet ones, the human ones. The music hiccuped. Emma was doing the same thing. I could feel her memories mixing with mine. Shared laughter, inside jokes, the simple comfort of friendship. We pushed those feelings into the spiral, contaminating its perfect pattern of horror with something messier, something human. The gravitron shuddered. No, Mr. Castellanos' voice from everywhere and nowhere. You can't. The pattern must be preserved. But it was too late. Other riders were picking up on what we were doing. The crying man was thinking about his daughter's first words. A teenager was remembering his dog. Small rebellions, tiny victories, each one a discordant note in the carnival's ancient song. The spinning slowed, just a little, but enough. Enough to remember that time was supposed to move forward, that people weren't meant to be trapped in eternal loops, that sometimes the ride has to end. Reality cracked like ice on a pond. Through the fissures I could see the real world. Police cars, fire trucks, dawn breaking over Cedar Rapids. How long had we been gone? Hours? Days? Hold on! I grabbed Emma as the gravitron began to tear itself apart. Not physically, but temporally. All the stolen moments, all the trapped years, unwinding at once. We fell through time like Alice down the rabbit hole. I saw the carnival in reverse. Its arrival in Cedar Rapids, its travels across the Midwest, further and further back. Before America, before colonization, before human memory. The thing that wore Mr. Castellanos' face revealed in its true form. Something vast and hungry and older than fear itself. And then, sunlight. Real sunlight, not the artificial glow of carnival bulbs. I was lying on cold ground, Emma beside me. Around us, others were waking up. The crying man, the teenagers. Even Martha from the corn dog stand looking confused but free. The carnival was gone. Not destroyed, not packed up, just gone. Like it had never been there at all. Only a perfect circle of dead grass showed where the gravitron had spun. "Is it over?" Emma asked. I looked at our hands. The spiral marks were still there, but faded now. Scars rather than burns. Reminders rather than chains. "I don't know," I said honestly. A cop was walking toward us, radio crackling. Behind him, paramedics were checking on the other survivors. I heard fragments of conversation. Missing for 3 days. Found them right where the call said. No sign of any carnival. 3 days. We'd been gone 3 days. Or maybe we'd been gone much longer, and only 3 days had passed. Time, I was learning, wasn't as solid as I'd thought. Emma squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens, we got out. We broke the pattern." I squeezed back. "Yeah, we did." But as the paramedics led us away, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, somewhen, the gravitron was still spinning. That in some fold of reality, we were still on it, would always be on it. That maybe escape was just another part of the ride. The paramedic was asking me questions. Name, date, what I remembered. I answered as best I could, but part of me was listening for something else. And there it was, faint as a whisper, carried on the morning wind. Calliope music. Emma heard it too, I could see it in her eyes. We'd escaped, yes. But the carnival was patient. It had been traveling for centuries, maybe longer. It would set up again, in some other town, with some other name, and the gravitron would spin. Round and round and round. The question is, and here's what I need you to think about, what I need you to answer in the comments. Have you ever been to a carnival that felt wrong? Have you ever ridden something that seemed to last too long? Have you ever heard music that you couldn't quite place, that followed you home? Because if you have, if any of this sounds familiar, then maybe you're still on the ride too. Maybe we all are. Maybe every moment of our lives is just another rotation, another spin in a cosmic gravitron that never, ever stops. Check your hands. Look for the spirals. And whatever you do, don't go back. But you will. We always do. The ride calls to its own. And somewhere in the space between seconds, in the pause between heartbeats, the Harvest Moon Carnival is setting up again. The lights are turning on. The music is beginning to play. And the gravitron is waiting for you. Sweet dreams. If this story kept you up, if it made you think twice about that small-town carnival, hit subscribe. Share it with someone who loves a good scare. And please, please tell me in the comments. Have you ever experienced anything like this? Because I receive messages, so many,